Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, August 20th, or 20th of August. Welcome to Lira Media's News Digest, and hopefully today we have some more positive news, let's put it that way. So starting off, of course, we're going to start with the situation in Afghanistan, because that's something we kind of need to cover on a daily at the moment with all the evolution that's going on there. For one thing, the US government is apparently charging $2,000 or more per person to extract American citizens from the country, so from Afghanistan, which of course is leaving a lot of people quite surprised at the fact that it's not being done, gracefully, if you want to put it that way, considering how much they've spent on the war there, being in the trillions. It's quite surprising that they would charge people all of a sudden to extract them from the country. Now, the Taliban have been promising to ban the production of drugs within Afghanistan. Now, apparently, according to some sources, that could change the world into a worse place, not a better one, which may come as a bit of a surprise considering the fact that, of course, this is a ban on drugs. But the concept is that basically the drugs that are being produced in certain countries are not as bad as some other drugs that could be produced. I don't know how to define it in a clearer way, but basically, for example, there was a situation in Estonia that there was less heroin being produced, and this led to a bunch of underworld kind of black market people producing way worse drugs to replace this heroin. The problem is, of course, that it wasn't that, it was something else that was being marketed in the same way, which was way worse for you and had way worse side effects. So the idea here, I think, is the fact that basically if you stop the production of a known drug that we know the side effects of, that we know how it works, etc., then people are going to start producing other variants, if you want, that are far worse. Now, staying in the Afghanistan situation, the EU, and specifically the countries, specifically France, Germany and Italy, have been having quite a lot of discussions about what to do in this situation. And apparently Putin, the president of Russia, actually had a call with President Macron of France and Minister Draghi from Italy. Now, they were basically just discussing what exactly they should do in this situation, and this is right before the German Chancellor Angela Merkel is on her way to Moscow to go and visit Putin there. So it's quite a complex situation actually right now, because these countries are debating basically what should happen and how they should react to the different countries in that area, changing their political stance, etc., etc. Like, what should they actually be doing? Now, that's kind of the big debate at the moment, and I believe that they haven't quite come to a full conclusion yet. Now, of course, one has to remember that Russia and France said, well, they're part of the UN's Security Council, so they're permanent members of it. So of course they have other missions and other jobs, but majorly protecting the planet is one of them. So if they consider that a country or a regime is a big risk, then they have to take action. That's basically their job. Now, continuing in that area of the world, the UK, France and Germany have been criticizing Iran for their continued work on uranium enrichment, although the US had imposed very large sanctions on them. Now, the problem is, of course, with the US withdrawing from that area of the world, it's very difficult for them to keep imposing sanctions. I mean, you can't really impose sanctions if you're not there to impose them. So, of course, that leaves quite a difficult situation in Iran as well, considering the fact that we're not entirely sure why the uranium is going to be enriched, what it's going to be used for, and so on and so forth. So that's obviously something that's quite a quite a large debate going on at the moment, and how the West is going to react is still to be determined. Speaking of possibly explosives, a man was threatening the Capitol with a bomb in his car and has apparently been arrested, but he said he wanted a call with Biden. And the one other thing he said is that the South is coming. So even with my limited knowledge of the American history, I can just imagine that that was kind of a reference to a long time ago when North versus South was still at war. And saying the South is coming basically means one of the southern states are, well, all of them are pushing away the northern states because of a disagreement. Now, speaking of Biden, he is set to cancel $5.8 billion in student debts for more than 323,000 disabled borrowers. So the idea is that basically for disabled students, he wants to remove the barrier between them and higher education by cancelling their student debt. So basically by giving them their university tuition so that they can keep studying, so that they can keep evolving in their careers and in their life basically, which is of course a really positive thing. Now, we're going to stay a little bit in the tech world for a small amount before going back to politics. Two things are happening. For those who know the platform OnlyFans, they are being forced to ban adult materials, in other words, specifically pornographic materials, after their payment processors have been pressuring them, telling them to stop promoting such materials. Although that's what the platform is kind of known for, they are being forced to stop, so to promote rather more mainstream things. Now, another tech thing, the government in the USA, the Federal Trade Commission, has actually filed a complaint against Facebook and is basically trying to force them to sell WhatsApp and Instagram, due to major antitrust issues, but also due to the simple fact that Facebook currently has a monopoly over general communication, which is against the law basically in the USA. Now, of course, this would affect the rest of the world immensely as well. If Facebook was to break up, and WhatsApp and Instagram were to be completely separate entities again, things would look quite different. Now, we also have a bit of an update on the Apple situation I covered a few days ago with their new, what they're calling the child safety feature. So a lot of groups, apparently over 90 rights groups, are busy fighting them basically, obviously on the legal sense, to not put this into place because the fact that it's possible to use it for other purposes, and they reckon it would censor protected speech. And the idea that basically it actually threatens the identity of children more than it protects them, in the sense that, of course, if they have constant facial recognition running on your phone, checking for pictures of your children, then of course that means they have facial recognition of your children. So there's quite a lot of tug and push here with what's going on basically due to this application being instated or not. We're not even sure if it's going to be put into place because of the amount of kickback that it's been given. So we'll see how that goes. It's quite a difficult one at the moment because, of course, should there be such a thing developed and instated, would other companies have to follow? Would it be a major downturn in Apple sales? We don't know what's going to happen because, of course, if people don't like it, they're not going to buy iPhones, and if they stop buying iPhones, Apple might have to stop doing it, and so on and so forth. There's many different questions that can happen there. Now, apparently, Amazon has decided that they're going to start building actual brick and mortar retail stores. In other words, they're going to start actually opening normal shops. So although they've been destroying the normal shop business for years by obviously taking over due to the fact that you can buy anything on Amazon, apparently now they've decided that they're going to actually start building their own shops. So they went from, making sure there weren't that many physical retail stores to now being one. We're not entirely sure how this is going to go, but yeah, I mean, it's quite intriguing to see how things are going to go. Apparently last year, Amazon actually last week, Amazon sales eclipsed even Walmart in overall world sales, becoming the world's largest retail seller outside of China. So this is according to The Guardian. Obviously, as you know, the sources will be posted down below. Now, that's definitely an interesting advancement considering how Amazon is reputed for not caring about physical shops. Now, okay, we're going to go back a bit to politics. A woman condemned in the Salem witch trials is potentially going to be pardoned. She was condemned and sentenced to death in 1693, and it's now 328 years later, and she may potentially be pardoned. So that's quite interesting. Now I have to obviously see how that's going to go and how it's going to develop, but quite interesting that someone who's been dead for, over 300 years is finally going to actually be pardoned and declared as innocent. That's quite nice. Now, keeping up with politics, the unions that back the House of Commons in the UK are kind of trying to motivate them to impose wearing masks in the House, because although it's not been mandatory anymore since the 19th of July, people are still saying that when they have a full house like they had with the situation in Afghanistan where everyone was there basically, it's kind of important for people to wear masks and so on. So there's a bit of turmoil going up there, but it's nothing major, let's put it that way. Now, on a more grand scheme of things, Poland, the Polish Regional Council has decided that they're going to retain their LGBT free zones. And for those of you who don't know what this is, it's basically the country has these areas where it's simply illegal to be part of the LGBT community. As simple as that. And you cannot live there, you cannot buy there, you cannot anything there basically. And they actually have these signs up that literally say zone without LGBT and so on. Now, although they were basically warned by the EU that they would lose 2.5 billion euros worth of funding, they've decided to actually keep it up and to simply not withdraw themselves from that original plan. So that's quite a difficult situation for that community of people, obviously. But of course, it also leads to a few questions whether or not this is, a country's right, whether it's an attack on human rights, etc., etc. Like, a lot of people are not quite sure how this places when it comes to the legality of it on international scales. Now, everyone kind of knows who Didier Raoult is, Didier Raoult, if you want to pronounce it in French. He's the person who promoted hydroxychloroquine. Hate that word, it's too long. And, apparently he's going to actually get kicked out of the lab that he founded because of the fact that he's been known to spread what is considered misinformation, and this is all during, of course, the COVID situation. We're not entirely sure how that's going to play out, but for sure there's going to be some changes there, so to be determined what actually happens. We're not entirely sure. Now, to keep going, I'm just going to quickly going to go through the obviously the new and latest news. It does seem like one of the major things that is happening right now is the fact that there's a major energy being put into extracting people from Afghanistan, but at the same time, although there's a lot of energy being put into that, there's a lot of distracting information as well. For example, there's a huge amount of football trades between players changing teams and so on. So there's quite a few other things happening that kind of, well, eclipse some of the major information. So that's why I have not been covering that much sport things. Sorry for anyone who was interested in those, but that's why. It's because I prefer to stay on the more, what I would consider critical information. Now, there is definitely a lot of information going around on companies that are changing ownership, which of course does lead to big political movements. So there's quite a few private companies that are going public, and apparently a few companies actually here in Korea are going to be going onto the stock market now. So, and that's apparently going to be quite a big change in not only their economy, but of course also the balance of these entities, because of course the more large companies join the stock market, the more there's power in the economy in some ways, because specifically in Korea there's a lot of people who invest in stocks, so it can actually lead to quite a few interesting things. So of course that's to be determined how this is going to go. I'm still waiting to get updates on that because it's not something that's very widespread on the world media, and that's of course what I try and specialize in. Now, the situation with, of course, Afghanistan is developing in interesting ways, in the sense that there's a lot of kind of information that contradicts itself, but also there's a lot of just situations where people wonder what's going to continue happening, what's going to happen next, what's going to be the next step. Because of course there's many promises happening from the part of the Taliban, there's many promises happening from the part of the US, but we're not quite sure what exactly is going to happen and how it's going to happen, how it's going to develop, and so on and so forth. Now, that's kind of what we're waiting for now, is to see what is actually going to happen next. One thing I did want to cover yesterday, which I only mentioned, there was a snake that slithered through a shopping centre in Australia. So it was found in the spice rack apparently, and well, let's just say that they found a nice little python slithering through the shop, and thanks goodness they actually had someone on hand who just happened to know what to do in that situation. But that was quite a shocking situation, let's put it that way. And another fun piece of information, this is 2 days old already, sorry. The police had to intervene as a group of 20 protesters or so entered Edinburgh Castle and seized the landmark under Article 61 of the Magna Carta, basically stating that they had taken ownership of this place. So obviously the police intervened, and that didn't last very long, but it's still quite interesting that people would quote a legal text from the 1600s. If I'm not much mistaken, that's when the Magna Carta was written. So, quite a while. But yes, thank you very much for tuning in today. And I'm not entirely sure what time tomorrow's episode will happen because of personal reasons. But hopefully I will manage to do it anyway. So, for now, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope everyone has a nice day. And, of course, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And if you would be willing, please share this with anyone you know who might be interested. It would help me a lot. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.